Howdy, scholars. All right, so today we're going to talk about a series of either court cases or governmental proceedings, something that changed something in the United States, either a boundary line or our court system, how we do things. So it's not a cool invention type of day, but it'll be all right. So the first thing is that during this time we had a series of court cases that we still utilize those decisions today in 2020. So the first two are the ones that we're really going to look at, which is the Gibbons versus Ogden. Speaking of steamboats, that was just talked about in the last video. It was two steamboat owners, and they were arguing about who had the right-of-way on the rivers. It'd be kind of like if you had a steamboat from Missouri and a steamboat from Illinois, and they were both trying to decide who had access to the Mississippi River, right? And so they decided that actually the federal government, the Washington, D.C. government, is the one that gets to decide things like that. The second court case is the McCullough versus Maryland. By the way, the little V means versus. You're going to see those in either court cases or boxing matches, but we're, of course, talking about court cases today. So in McCullough versus Maryland, this was a Supreme Court case. And by the way, the guy in the photo there is Chief Justice John Roberts, who is going to be the head of these Supreme Court decisions. And it said that a federal law is always going to be more important or held of higher standard than a state law. So in the current climate today, what that means is that if Missouri had, like right now we have a no mask mandate in Missouri. It's kind of just up to different cities. Of course, like different stores have it, and then schools. Like we kind of just decide amongst ourselves between cities and facilities if masks are required. However, the McCullough versus Maryland says that in Washington, D.C., if our federal government decided that everyone had to wear masks when out in public, then their rule is going to take more precedence than Missouri's rule. So just a heads up on that. So when we're talking about the spirit of nationalism, this rule is important because it's saying that all 50 states have to abide by the same thing. So if our federal government puts out a law or a mandate or a resolution, it doesn't just affect one state, it affects all 50 states. So for better or for worse, we can all be happy about it or we can all be mad about it, but that is what it says. So once again, that would be current. It could also be something simple like our federal government declared that everyone eats tacos on Tuesday, right? So, which they'll never do, but that would be awesome, right? Chips and guacamole for everyone. But their law is over a state law. So once again, it's not really exciting, it's not glamorous, but it's two court cases, definitely, that you would see possibly on a government test, like once you're a junior in high school, because it sets the standard for things we still do and follow in 2020. So once again, that's the why do they matter? Because we still follow them today. The next is the Rush-Bagot Treaty. This is basically over the Great Lakes. So at this time, both Britain and us, the United States, have warships or naval ships, however you wish to look at it, in the Great Lakes. So I know it seems weird that they're fighting battles occasionally on the Great Lakes, but you can still find remnants of these battleships in the Great Lakes. Now we just like fish on them, right? So it seems odd, but back then it wasn't. And so the Rush-Bagot Treaty, the first thing it said was they're going to reduce the number of the naval ships, both England and us, on the Great Lakes. And two, it set up the boundary lines. So like Lake Huron, if you're on this side fishing, you're in the United States. If you cross over here, you're actually in Canada, which at the time, think like British controlled. And so if you ever wonder, some of our states in the United States are super close to Canada, like Detroit. It's literally right here on the dividing line, and so is Buffalo, New York. So if you look, it's right here on the dividing line as well. So that's the Rush-Bagot Treaty. Next, we have the Convention of 1818, and this is where we start to set our northern boundary line in the United States along the 49th parallel. So the 49th parallel. Now, we're still going to argue over this little section of land occasionally, but as we know today, we just follow the 49th parallel. Now, the next one. I always heard the Adams Onus, but I think there is a little slash over the I, which would maybe make it Onus Treaty. Potato, potato, Missouri, Missouri, whichever way you want to look at it. But the main thing, we get Florida. So what's going on in Florida, there's Seminole Indians who are coming over into Alabama and Georgia, and they're raiding the settlers there, the United States citizens that are there. And so at the time, the U.S. sends some military into Spain to stop this Seminole uprising. So you got Seminole Indians and alligators in Florida, right? Well, one of the people they send down is future President Andrew Jackson. And so he goes down, he puts up the uprising, and he actually contacts the president, and he says, hey, I've actually basically commandeered Florida. We've set up a, really rough governmental system down here. In fact, we already have settlers from Alabama and Georgia that are coming over and setting up shop. And so why don't you just, contact Spain and ask them to give us Florida? And so that's what they do. That's what the president does. He says, hey, we've got Florida under control. It's Florida, right? Florida, man, it's Florida. And so they're more than willing, to give us Florida. So this is how we got Florida. And then also it sets up, we now have everything above the red line. So if it's above the red line, we have it. There is still a little debate over here with who owns parts of Oregon between us and Britain. But this is what we have. And that's the Adams-Onus Treaty. The last kind of governmental thing that it's not last, second to last, I lied, sorry about that, is the Monroe Doctrine. So they're really tired of other European countries coming over, basically trying to plant their flag in the ground and saying that this is England, or it's for Portugal, or it's for Italy, or if it's for France, right? And so President Monroe kind of throws a little hissy fit. He puts his big boy pants on and thumps his chest, and he issues the Monroe Doctrine to these European countries. And he says that Americas, not the United States of America, the Americas. So think North America, Central America, and possibly South America. But he's really concerned about North America and Latin America, right? He says they're closed, but they can no longer come over and plant the flag and call it theirs. In fact, so this is the most famous political cartoon during this time period. And so political cartoons are really cool. It's a way to get across information without having to read a novel about it. So your idea is you're looking at this political cartoon, and each one of these gentlemen are represent different countries, very stereotypically represent different countries. And so the title of the political cartoon is Keep Off. The wording on the sign says, "No trespass, America for Americans," signed by Uncle Sam. So in class what we would do, we would have a discussion about who do these men represent, what countries are they from. So since we really can't have that in-class discussion, it would be good if you paused the video and then you try to figure out who you think they represent, and then unpause it and I'm going to discuss it and see if you're right. Okay? Okay. All right, so I'm assuming that you paused, hopefully, cross my fingers. So hopefully you got that this was Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam is kind of our symbol of America. You can tell he's got red and white striped pants. He's got the blue shirt. He's got the star. Of course, he's holding a weapon, right? Okay, and so he is guarding these gentlemen over here. Now, if you remember from our last slide, it says he is the protector of Latin America. So going back to the photo here, photo painting, political cartoon, he is protecting these gentlemen, so they would represent Latin America. Now, this body of water is symbolic. It's supposed to be the dividing body of water between North America and Latin America and Europe. So this represents the Atlantic Ocean. Of course, over here, this gentleman, this guy right here is supposed to represent England. If you know anything about Napoleon, right, he's always depicted as short, his chest puffed out. So France, and then between these three, you are assuming that it's Spain, Portugal, and Italy, right? So he's issuing this Monroe Doctrine, this challenge to these European nations. They don't look that thrilled about it, right? All right, so our last one that we're going to talk about has to deal with the state that you live in, the Missouri Compromise. So at this point, in actually about 1816-ish, Missouri was ready to be entered as a state. We had slaves, so it was just assumed that Missouri would enter as a slave state. At This time there were 10 slave states and 11 free states. So everyone was pretty chill about them entering because that would actually equal out things in Congress. You would have 11 slave states and 11 free states. The problem was in the wording that let Missouri enter as a slave state, it also said that gradually Missouri would start to free their slaves, right? Okay, so the southern states didn't like that, so they actually blocked the passage of this bill in Congress that would let Missouri become a slave state. So in this couple year span of time between like 1816 and 1820, Alabama actually becomes a state. They are a slave state. So now it's all tied up. It's 11 and 11. There are 11 free and 11 slave states. And so the hopes of Missouri becoming a state are starting to decrease greatly. But there's a guy. His name is Henry Clay. We actually have a county up by Kansas City named Clay County after him. He came up with this, the Missouri Compromise. He said, okay, Missouri is going to enter as a slave state. There's another state that was thinking about asking to enter the Union of the United States, and that's Maine. They're going to enter as a free state. So that would equal things out again. There would be 12 slave states and 12 free states. So think about this. In the Senate, there are 2 senators for each state. So that would equal out the numbers in the Senate. They would be equal when they would go to make decisions in the Senate. So that's what they decided to do, and this is how Missouri becomes a state. So without this compromise, it's named after our state. It's not called the Maine Compromise. It's called the Missouri Compromise. We get Missouri as a state. This is what it looks like at the time. All the green states are slave states. All these yellowy tan are free states. So Maine up here enters as free, right? Missouri enters as slave. Now, it also, this red line right here, but 3630 parallel. So if you're looking at a globe, this is the line of latitude that goes around the globe. It said anything above this line would be a free state. Anything below the line would become a slave state when it entered the Union. Now, if you're a thinking person, you're like, yeah, but that's a lot of free area and not a lot of slave area. You would be correct, especially when you think about this little section right here is Oklahoma, and they're going to be pushing all the Native Americans to Oklahoma, and it's not going to be a state. It's just a territory for a very long time. So, just a spoiler alert, we're going to be going to war pretty soon. It'd be in the next unit we do over Texas and this area down here to try to expand this blue area. Now, what I'm going to do after, I'm going to put in our little video about the Missouri Compromise. So after this video will be the links, just like always, to all the extra videos that I haven't showed you. And then this actually finishes section 2. So here are your deep thought things that you hopefully can answer at the end of section 2. So what short and long-term goals does President Monroe have in mind? So President Monroe, the Monroe Doctrine, right? And then also a question about the Missouri Compromise. That's pretty important because, of course, you live here in Missouri. So our next unit will be over President Jackson. I'm actually going to give you on I don't know, maybe Thursday, probably, Wednesday, Thursday. It's a little web quest where you watch videos and answer a chart about President Jackson as a little introductory thing about him this week. And then I'll have a video about things about Jackson. So have a good week. Email me if you have any questions, concerns, and see you later, scholars.